Some of the most prolific serial killers of all time have burned their names and their terrifying acts into the annals of history. People like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Jack the Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe have all been immortalised in books, films and TV series. These psychotic killers took the lives of 5, 10, 100 people. And yet, as horrific as these numbers are, there are other individuals who've been responsible for the deaths of even more. In just 3 years, 8 months and 20 days, under the leadership of the then Cambodian Prime Minister Pol Pot, between 1.2 and 2.8 million human beings were murdered from 1975 to 1979. Adolf Hitler oversaw the killing of approximately 17 million people, and under Joseph Stalin, estimates range from between 6 and 20 million people murdered. And these are just a few examples from the past century. We call these acts of terror genocide, and when we first learn about them in school or college, we simply can't comprehend how any human being could do such a thing. Taking the life of one person is the worst thing most of us could ever think of doing, let alone the mass murder of millions. And yet, our entire human civilization has been built on death, destruction, and mass extinction. This is Refracted World. On the previous episode, I talked about the fundamentals of human evolution and how Homo Sapiens, us, have only existed for approximately 250,000 years. Human beings evolved quickly, maybe even too quickly. We have evolved faster than any other species before us, and that has brought with it incredible advancements, but also global devastation. Our human ancestors left our homeland in South Africa, now known as the cradle of humanity, and began to venture out into the wilderness. For over 1 million years, we stayed within the comforts of our home. It wasn't until Homo erectus that we left Africa for the very first time, journeying all the way to Asia. Our ancestors continued the traditions passed on to them and lived their lives as hunter-gatherers. This remained unchanged until we emerged in East Africa 250,000 years ago. For a time, we too were hunter-gatherers, but that was never going to be enough for this new genus. We were the latest evolution of human, and as part of this new version, we got a brain upgrade. We thought and functioned differently to all of those who came before us. This is known as the cognitive revolution. From fossil evidence, we know that Neanderthals could speak, probably just as well as we can. But speech needs something more than just words. It needs thought behind them. Homo sapiens had evolved brains that didn't just think, they dreamed. We could imagine things that were not real and be able to articulate our dreams to others. Gossiping, inventing stories, creating deities, and the ability to communicate with large numbers of people, something no other species had been able to do. Through this process, we gained a consciousness, and with it came belief, speculation, lies, love, depression, ecstasy, and opinions on our self-image and worth. We began to see ourselves as the most important species on the planet, and our survival was more important than anything else. We needed to populate the entire world. We needed to be with more of our kind for safety and support, and we needed to eliminate as much risk to our continued survival as possible. There were obviously no cars or planes back then. We hadn't even invented the wheel, and even if we had, we still hadn't tamed any wild animals. So, we could build a cart, but we had nothing to pull it, therefore it wouldn't have gotten very far. And so, we walked, presumably barefoot, across deserts and forests and mountains and valleys. We travelled through snow and wind and rain and intense heat. And over the course of thousands of years, we traversed almost every landmass on Earth. But wherever Homo sapiens went, we left a trail of corpses in our wake. We all know about the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs and caused the extinction of 80% of life on Earth, and most of us know this was just one of many mass extinctions. But what is rarely talked about is the amount of extinctions caused by us. When Homo sapiens travelled on makeshift boats across the ocean to Australia, they were presented with a truly alien world. Isolated from the rest of the planet, this continent in the South Pacific was thriving with life, which had evolved completely separately from the rest of the world, and therefore its unique life didn't exist anywhere else. Megafauna was once abundant on Earth, but today we are left with only a handful of species. Elephants and rhinos are megafauna, as is any species weighing over 44 kilograms. In the not too distant past, these huge creatures were everywhere. These include species you have likely heard of: woolly mammoths, megalodon, and saber-toothed cats. Not tigers, as some of us learned in school. The pre-internet days really were the Wild West of learning. In Australia, fossil evidence shows us a rich ecosystem of unique life and a lot of megafauna. Diprotodon was a heavily built, large-bellied quadruped, almost 4 meters in length and 2 meters high. As a herbivore, it dined out on at least 100 kilograms of vegetation each day, with saltbrush being found fossilized in its abdominal region. Other huge species found in the fossil record include a giant kangaroo known as a Procoptodon, the world's largest ever terrestrial lizard, the Megalania, and a marsupial lion. After years of speculation that climate change was the reason for the extinction of these and many other types of flora and fauna in Australia, it is now widely accepted that their deaths were caused by humans. We colonised the island around 45,000 years ago, and not long after, creatures which had survived and thrived there for thousands and millions of years were wiped out. If we were talking about the extinction of just one or two species, we might be able to chalk that down to merely survival of the fittest or natural selection. But it wasn't. 90% of Australia's megafauna were erased from existence soon after humans arrived. But why? We could understand protecting ourselves against lions and giant lizards, but what about the Diprotodon? Yes, it was big, but it was also a herbivore. Perhaps we killed it for its meat, or to take its land, or to protect our children. But when you kill enough of one species, there simply isn't enough of its kind left to procreate. It wasn't just megafauna, though, that disappeared. Plants, trees, birds, and even small mammals fared the same fate. So many species exterminated to make way for us. And it's not just Australia. It's everywhere. We evolved in Africa, whereas Neanderthals mostly populated Europe. Approximately 100,000 years ago, we left our homeland and travelled north, into the Middle East and beyond. In Europe, we met, fought, and even procreated with Neanderthals. But according to archaeologists, we were not the cause of their extinction. We were just the latest evolution of human and able to navigate this world in a way no other human could before us. That's good news for us, but bad news for the planet. As the ice sheets retreated at the end of the Pleistocene, we ventured even further north and discovered a land bridge connecting eastern Siberia and Alaska. It existed for around 5,000 years before the ocean reclaimed it, but that was more than enough time for Homo sapiens to make America a new land for humankind. The Americas are huge. If we follow the path of the Pan-American Highway, the entire continent from Alaska to Argentina is approximately 30,000 kilometers long. But once we had a sufficient group of humans in the north, it didn't take us very long to make our way south, populating every pocket of land we could. Homo sapiens first stepped foot on what we would eventually call America 30,000 years ago. Within a few thousand years, the majority of megafauna was gone, and the land sterilized for our way of life to take hold. The last holdouts of the planet were the islands we struggled to get to, but we still got to them eventually. Remote places like Hawaii, New Zealand, and Madagascar. Just 1,500 years ago, so 500 CE, humans made it to the large island of Madagascar. 400 kilometers off the East African mainland. What they found was an evolutionary marvel. Just like Australia, this island was teeming with unique life. A massive half-ton flightless bird earned its name the elephant bird. Giant lemurs, the world's largest primates, and the giant fossa, a puma-like predator. Left untouched throughout the creation of Earth, this island must have been akin to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. And yet, soon after humans landed on the island, all of these species, and many others, were gone. For many years, we tried to console ourselves with climate change or environmental factors. And even though, yes, these made an impact, deep down, we always knew it was our fault. Wherever Homo sapiens went, the extinction of flora and fauna followed. From fossil remains, we can clearly see the cut marks and evidence of butchery on extinct species. Every animal that wasn't human was simply food or clothing for us to eat and use. Our cognitive advantage had made us believe we were the most important creatures ever to evolve. This went far beyond our natural instinct to survive. We told stories to ourselves of creation and put sapiens in the center of those stories. With no scientific evidence, we chose to believe this myth and use the planet solely for our gain. Our insatiable need to survive came at the cost of everything else, in a time when we didn't have the knowledge to understand the delicate balance of nature. And by the time we did, it was too late for far too many species. The only places that were spared the advancement of Homo sapiens were those far too remote for even the most daring of our ancestors. The best known example of this are the Galapagos Islands. This archipelago is located around 900 kilometers west of Ecuador in South America. It was first discovered 500 years ago, and thankfully, humans were a little more knowledgeable about conservation by then. I say a little more, as we all know even today humans still prize themselves above every other living creature. Except pandas, of course. Everyone loves pandas. Even if all they do is eat bamboo and are far too lazy to procreate. But they're just so cute, those adorable little bears. For the most part, Earth was conquered by Homo sapiens 12,000 years ago. Throughout our generational journeys, we formed communities which grew bigger and bigger as time went on. As I mentioned in the previous episode, Homo sapiens are the first and only animal, that we know of, to be able to form and maintain large groups of the same species. This is down to how our brains work and the ability to imagine and think big. One of our thoughts, which appear to have happened spontaneously around the globe around the same time, was to start farming. Imagine what life must have been like as a hunter-gatherer, having to pick your fruit and veg wherever they grow, having to hunt and kill animals for meat and clothing, sheltering in caves and always being on the move. Between 10 and 12,000 years ago, we learned that by saving seeds, we no longer needed to venture into the wilderness to find sustenance. We could simply plant and regrow it ourselves. We could also tame wild animals and keep them in pens to use for milk or meat, or pets and workers. This all sounded like a much better plan than what we had been doing for our entire existence. No more scavenging. What we didn't consider were the negatives, and what this new way of life would actually mean for us long term. Yes, we could settle in one place, and yes, we could raise more children, but the workload would be much higher. Having to plant, plough and weed fields, having somewhere to store our produce and then guard it from potential poachers, staying in one place throughout all seasons instead of following more favourable weather patterns, and living on a much poorer diet. As hunter-gatherers, we had every food source available to us, meaning we were getting all the nutrients we needed. But as farmers, we were living on the very few items we could grow or slaughter. Stability enabled us to grow the population, but at a high cost. People didn't live as long on a poorer diet, disease was rampant, and attacks from animals or other humans were frequent and often ended in bloodshed. But by the time we realised agriculture was a bad idea, we'd already forgotten the old ways. and we couldn't go back. It's like losing your mobile phone. 30 years ago, they didn't exist, therefore we didn't miss them. But now, 1 hour without your pocket computer and it's as if we'd lost a limb. Moving away from the nomadic life was such a radical change of lifestyle. Our bodies were not designed to be awake and working all day long, hauling heavy sacks of grain and living off a fraction of the nutrients the wider world could offer us. But although the negatives experienced by individuals outweighed the perceived positives, once we had them, we could no longer give up the comfort of our homes and possessions to live the life of a scavenger again. Our future was on a fixed path. The agricultural revolution was not only bad for humans, it was also terrible for the planet. Farming takes up a lot of land. Taming wild animals is a difficult task, and not all animals can be used to service our needs. Our ancestors therefore focused on the animals they could tame, and usually wiped out those we couldn't or were seen as a threat. Once again, adding to that ever-growing list of species whose extinction was brought about by our actions. Farm animals, of course, had a massive population explosion. In the world today, there are 35 billion chickens, 940 million cows, and over 1 billion sheep. But what kind of life do they have? For the majority of livestock and cattle, they are born, they are caged, and they are slaughtered before their first birthday. They have no interaction with any other living creature, their cages are not much bigger than they are, and the only exercise they get is the walk to the killing machine. I didn't know until researching this episode that cows are constantly impregnated, simply so we can keep harvesting their milk for our cereal and caffeinated beverages. How did I not know this? But when you stop to think about it, of course this is how we get a continuous supply of milk. Cows are mammals, and just like us, they can only lactate when their offspring is born. Therefore, they have to be constantly giving birth. I believe the reason why I, and possibly the wider population, didn't realise this before is because we disassociate what we consume from where it actually comes from. When the cow gives birth, the female calves will suffer the same fate as their mothers, and the males, for the most part, will spend their entire lives in a claustrophobic cage before ending up on our plates. But farming has gone much further. Humans take over forests and marshes and deserts and countryside simply so we can plant our seeds, killing off natural habitats and everything that once thrived there. And in summary, we work much harder and longer than the hunter-gatherers before us. We have much poorer diets, we succumb to many more diseases, and we kill, at times rather inhumanely, anything that gets in our way. Again, except pandas. And in our much more evolved state, in the biggest information age of all time, and with so much learned and written knowledge and history at our fingertips, what have we done to change this? Nothing. How can we? For 10,000 years, this is the only life we've known. Could any of us seriously step away from the protection of our homes, leaving everything behind, and move into a remote cave to live off whatever food we can find and kill? No electricity, no social media, no Netflix. We don't even like to see a whole fish on our plates with its head and eyes intact, let alone spear and kill one to cook on a makeshift fire. I have been asked by my Asian husband to make an exception here. In Asian cuisine, it's actually quite common to see the whole animal on your plate, as it shows a sign of good or fresh food. Personally, I don't mind seeing the whole fish there, but I wouldn't like to see a lamb on my plate. Homo sapiens spread out too far and evolved too fast, and now every corner of our planet is ruled and occupied by us. 8 billion of us. Homes and settlements bring security, and a constant and much larger flood of children into the world. Almost 400,000 babies will be born just today. This is only possible because of the agricultural revolution. But it also means there is little room left for any other living creature. Everything edible is ours for the taking, and everything that isn't edible to us is uprooted and the soil is replanted with crops that are. Homo sapiens are the world's most destructive and prolific mass killer, and as we are the dominant species, there's no one to stop us continuing until there's nothing left. Thankfully, with history comes knowledge. We now know that trees and ocean life clear up the CO2 and allow us to breathe. Many of us understand that cows are the worst of all livestock, and by not eating beef, we can help save the planet. And we understand that although we are at the top of the food chain, all life is important. Well, maybe not mosquitoes. But still, we push forward with blinkers on. 100 years ago, the Industrial Revolution created a brand new world for humanity. Transport, communication, faster work outputs, all intended to benefit us, but once again, at the cost of everything else. Pollution changed our climate, poisoned the air we breathe and the water we drink. We have killed off, or brought to the brink of extinction, many species of flora and fauna just in the past century. We are still those farmers 10,000 years ago, fooling ourselves into believing that what we're doing right now will pay off for us in the near future. But it didn't for them, and it likely won't for us. We can only make a better future if we start laying the foundations for it today. Since the agricultural revolution, we have worked to survive. We procreate and we die, usually with stress, pain, and disease brought about by the amount and types of work we do. But we've now reached a point where the entire system is breaking down. It has become clear that if we continue down this same path, the next mass extinction will likely be our own. Homo sapiens are the most dominant species on the planet. We've evolved the brains to think smarter than any other species before us. Why are we not using this advantage to imagine a new future, which is not just better for us, but for every living thing on Earth, of which we share this beautiful planet with? There is a vast universe out there, but to our knowledge, only our planet has life. In the future, we may find millions of other species on countless other worlds, or we may be the first. And if that's true, we need to cherish life, all life, and preserve as much as we possibly can. Our past may be littered with unnecessary death, but our future doesn't have to be. We are not cattle. We are individuals with highly evolved brains. If we want to survive as a species, we need to change how we currently live. We did so 10,000 years ago, and although that didn't really play out like we hoped, we now have the luxury of shared knowledge and hindsight. It's time we learned from the past and began to shape a better future. We can do this. We just need to stand together and make it happen. Just don't expect any help from the pandas, though. If you want to know more about anything you've learned in today's episode, we really do live in a true information age. Everything is available to us for free online. Simply go to whichever search engine you use, type in your question, and you'll get your answers. As Homo sapiens, we have the ability to think, learn, and shape the world around us. Question everything, and never stop learning. If you like this video, please like, comment, share. All of these things help grow the channel, and in turn, help me creating more content like this. And as valued viewers and listeners, if you like the look of anything you see in the official merch store on Etsy, please use the code PODCAST20 and it will give you a massive 20% discount. The link is in the description. Until next time, take care, Sapiens, and goodbye.